Josh Harrison had never been one to scare easily. At 32, living alone in the heart of New York City, he was used to the hustle and bustle of city life and the strange noises that came with it. But there was something off about the third-floor apartment he'd moved into 6 months ago. Josh Harrison, a 32-year-old man, had always been the type to shrug off strange occurrences. Living alone in an apartment on the third floor of a building in the heart of New York City, he was accustomed to the noises of city life, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout in the streets below, and the constant rush of people going about their business. Yet, ever since he'd moved into this apartment 6 months ago, something had felt off. There was a strange unease that he couldn't quite shake, a lingering tension that hovered in the corners of his mind. It all started one evening, after a particularly long and grueling shift at his tech job. He returned home, drained and looking for nothing more than a quiet night to unwind. The apartment felt still, almost too still. He pulled open the curtains to let in the cool night air, hoping the breeze would ease his exhaustion. But as he did, his eyes landed on something that made his blood run cold. There, standing outside his window, was a figure. It wasn't just a vague silhouette. It was a man, tall and unmoving, his features shrouded in the darkness outside. The sight was strange, disorienting. Josh blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. Surely it was a trick of the light, or maybe the fatigue was finally catching up with him. He dismissed the thought and went to bed, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. But as he lay in the quiet of his room, his mind couldn't escape the image of the man standing outside. The feeling of being watched gnawed at him. Was he imagining things? Had his exhaustion finally gotten the best of him? He wasn't sure, but he couldn't shake the dread that clung to him like a second skin. The thought that someone, anyone, might be standing there watching him night after night was enough to keep him awake. The next few nights followed the same pattern. Josh would arrive home, exhausted, only to pull back the curtains and find the same figure standing motionless outside his window. It was as if the person was waiting, watching, doing nothing but standing there in the dark. Josh started to wonder if maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. Maybe he was just sleep-deprived, or maybe it was the isolation of living in this apartment that was getting to him. But no matter how many times he tried to rationalize it, the dread wouldn't go away. His friends, when he told them about it, laughed it off. "It's just a recurring dream," one of them suggested. "Maybe you're sleepwalking, Josh," another joked. But Josh knew better. The terror he felt wasn't something he could chalk up to bad dreams. The figure was real. 2 weeks went by, and every night, the man continued to appear. Josh couldn't stand it anymore. He had to do something. One morning, after barely sleeping a wink, Josh picked up the phone and called the building's manager, Frank Jenkins. Frank was an older man who had been managing the building for years. When Josh explained the situation, Frank chuckled, as though he had heard this exact story countless times before. "You're not the first person to report this," Frank said with a smile. "But don't worry, there's a simple explanation. Let me show you." Josh, confused and desperate for answers, followed Frank down the hall to the window in question. The window itself was old, an awkward, heavy thing that had never been properly replaced. Frank explained, "The window's faulty. The inner glass is reflective, but the outer glass is transparent. At night, when the light hits it just right, you end up seeing your own reflection." Josh was dumbfounded. He looked out the window, then at Frank. "What do you mean? How could it be my reflection?" Frank nodded knowingly. "It's simple, really. That figure you see? It's just you. Your reflection, standing there, looking back at you." Josh's mind raced. Could it really be that simple? Could he have been seeing his own reflection all this time, just misinterpreting it in his exhaustion? It didn't make sense, but Frank's calm explanation was the only thing that seemed to offer any clarity. Still, Josh couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He couldn't dismiss it as easily as Frank had. That night, after Frank left, Josh stayed up, his eyes glued to the window. He watched intently, waiting to see if the reflection would appear again. As the hours passed, his anxiety grew. The figure didn't move, didn't do anything at all. It just stood there. And then it hit him. His reflection, the one Frank had explained, wasn't standing. It was lying in bed, exactly where it should be. Josh's heart skipped a beat. If the figure wasn't his reflection, then who or what was standing there? The next few days were a blur. Josh couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. Was someone living in his apartment, hiding in the shadows while he slept? Or was it something far darker? Something that defied explanation? He searched the apartment for any sign that someone had been in his space. Footprints, items out of place, anything. But there was nothing. The apartment was untouched, as if no one had been there at all. The figure, however, never left. Every night, it stood outside the window, just as it always had. Josh tried to convince himself it was nothing, just a trick of the mind. But the unease in his gut only grew stronger. On one final night, Josh decided he couldn't take it anymore. Armed with a flashlight, he made his way to the window, determined to confront whatever it was that had been haunting him for weeks. He stood in front of the glass, staring at the figure on the other side. As he peered closer, the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. The figure wasn't a man. It was him. His own reflection, but not in the way he expected. It wasn't a mirror image. This reflection was standing, watching, waiting. In that moment, everything unraveled for Josh. His mind fractured, unable to process what he was seeing. Was it a glimpse of his past, or something far more sinister? He couldn't say for sure. After that night, Josh was never seen again. His apartment remained vacant, the window untouched, and no one could explain what had happened to him. Some say he's still out there, trapped in the reflection, staring back at the window for all eternity. Others believe something far darker took him, something that couldn't be explained. Either way, his story became another eerie echo of the city, a tale of terror that no one could forget. Thank you for joining me in this nightmarish tale. If you found this story chilling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more creepy stories from Eerie Echoes.